Hi, my name is Parker from Carlsen Associates. Today we have Yamada NDP25 here. We'll be doing a basic service on it, changing the diaphragms, servicing the regulator, going from there. Although this is an NDP25, it's basically the same from the NDP15 to the NDP80. So we'll go ahead and start by removing the airline here at the inlet. We just like to use a crescent wrench here, just pull this guy off, and we'll go from there. Once you get to a certain point, you can just use your fingers and pull the rest of it off. Just set that aside. And then from there, we'll go ahead and flip this guy up so we can get to the 4 bolts here on the bottom. We'll grab a impact with an 11/16 socket, and we'll go ahead and zap these guys off. Take these guys off. That guy, and we'll leave this one a little bit loose. Just like that. Go ahead and put these bolts just on the bench or something. Keep track of them. And we'll go ahead and flip this guy back. And reach underneath and just unthread this bolt. So now that you have all the bolts out of the bottom, we'll go ahead and grab this guy and just pick it straight up and put it on our bench. And then we'll also grab these guys right here. This is your lower O-ring, your seat, the ball, and the cup. We'll just throw these guys on the bench as well. And same with the other side. And then we'll go ahead and put this guy off to the side. So now that you have it on the bench, first thing we like to do is remove the muffler. Just pull this guy straight off and we'll set it aside. You can also test it while you're at it. Blow some air through it and make sure that it still, flows air. If not, and you have a clogged muffler, you want to replace that. Otherwise, if you don't and it's clogged, you won't get any air out of it and your pump will run slow or not at all. So that guy's off. I'll grab our impact again and we'll zap the top bolts off. And once you have these guys off, these are the same bolts that you took out on the bottom, so they can go in the same little area here. And now the top manhole can come off. Take this guy off, put it aside. So you'll notice that we'll have the same parts on the upper side of the pump. So we'll have an O-ring, we'll have the cup, the ball, the seat, and then unlike the bottom, we'll have another O-ring at the bottom of the side of the pump here. And I'll explain the differences when we go to reassemble. So we'll do the same thing for the other side, pull the rest of the parts out. And next step will be to grab the impact with the 11/16 socket again, and this time we're going to zap off these guys here. So you'll have 6 bolts on each side. Just pull these guys off and we'll set them aside. And this guy can come off. Set that aside. And then we'll do the same thing for the other side. Set the bolts aside, pull the other half off, and then now we have the diaphragms. So to get the diaphragms off, we use the impact again. This time we'll use a 7/8 socket, and we'll just pull it off. There's one. So the next step would be to take the cone washer off. Sometimes it's easier to use a pick and pick it off. With these guys, you'll notice that one side is raised compared to the other. What that does, that ensures that the nut, when it's tight, will not back off while the pump is running. We'll set those guys aside. Next step, we'll grab our pick and we'll pull the plates off. With the plates, you'll notice that you'll have two. So you'll have one flat plate and you'll have one plate with a curve on it. The curve goes against the diaphragm. What that does is it ensures that you won't puncture the diaphragm with the sharp edge that the other side has, and the diaphragms last longer. Go ahead and set that aside, and we'll do the same thing for the other side. Set that guy aside, and then from there, we can pull the diaphragms off. So we use a pick. Just separate it from the housing of the pump, and then push on this shaft and pull that guy off. And then in some pumps, it depends on the serial number, you'll have an O-ring underneath the diaphragm. Some do, some don't. This guy has one right here. We'll go ahead and you can either leave that there or pull it off. But the next step would be to remove the inner plates. The inner plates are the same as the outer plates, except for it will say air side on the inside of it, but it's the same design. You want to make sure that the curved edge goes against the diaphragm to ensure that they'll last longer. So we'll go ahead and set that aside and then do the same thing on the other side. Remove the diaphragm and the O-ring as well, and the plates. Behind the plates there will be a spacer. What the spacer does, it's a rubber spacer. It takes the impact so the plates don't hit up against the body of the pump itself. We'll take those guys and set them aside. And then from there, you can pull the shaft straight out. And now your pump is completely disassembled. So now that your pump's apart, next step would be to clean everything. So if you had a breached diaphragm, then underneath here in the air side, you'll see it'll either be corroded if it sat a long time, or there'll be some debris. What you can do is you can use some mild dish soap and some warm water. Scrub brush, go ahead and clean that. When you clean that though and you get water on this side, you want to make sure that you use an air gun and blow it out. You want to make sure that water doesn't sit in there and corrode the aluminum pump itself. The air side is aluminum. The wet side is stainless and all sanitary. So like I said, you want to use an air gun to get all that water out of there, prevent corrosion. And then what we like to do is spray a little WD-40 in there and blow it out. That way the water is displaced, and it also lubricates and protects the aluminum. So in this case, the pump's clean, it's good to go. These diaphragms are brand new as well, so we'll just throw these guys back in. But as far as the halves of the pumps, we'll go ahead and make sure that these are clean. If not, we can use the same thing, some dish soap and some warm water, and go ahead and scrub them up, clean them, as well as the seats, the balls, the cups, and the manifolds, both top and bottom. But in this case, it's all clean, so we'll take the shaft, and I like to take a rag. You can use the same thing if it's dirty with some mild dish soap and some soapy water, and go ahead and clean the shaft. Go ahead and clean the spacers, the plates, all that stuff. Make sure it's all good to go. If you're going to use some water and like some soapy water on the air plates on the inside, you want to make sure those are dry, so take a rag and dry them off. In this case, they just have a little lubricant on it, so I'm going to wipe that off. And these guys will be good to go for reassembly. So reassembly, the next step would be to take some lubricant. We use Petrogel here at the shop. We have this in stock as well if you need some. And we'll go ahead and take the shaft, and we'll just put a little bit on the shaft. It doesn't have to be a whole lot, just enough to lubricate it. And we'll go ahead and wipe that in nice and evenly. And once that is all lubricated, we'll go ahead and take this guy and put it into the pump. Make sure it rides nice and smooth, and then you can check the shaft play. You want to make sure that there's, you're going to have some shaft play, but you want to make sure it's not like a lot. A little shaft play is fine, a little up and down, and it's moving nice and freely, so we'll go ahead and put this thing back together. We can wipe up the excess lubricant here with a rag on both sides of the shaft, and from there, just put it back together the same way it came apart. So we'll take spacers here, put them back on, both sides. And then the air side plates, again, you want to make sure that the curved side goes against the diaphragm, the curved side here. That guy will go on here. We'll do the same thing for the other side. Again, curved side out. So once you have the air plates in on the shaft, pumps with the serial number 487505 and greater require this O-ring on the outside of the diaphragm here. If you have a pump before that serial number, then this O-ring is not required. This groove will actually not even be in the casting. So if you have a pump with serial number greater than 487505, don't worry about the O-ring. If you do, make sure the O-ring's in there. I'm going to take your diaphragm, put it over the shaft, and That guy's ready to go. We'll do the same thing for the other side. Actually, this side doesn't have the O-ring. We'll make sure the O-ring's in there. And we'll take the diaphragm, put that guy in place. And then, now that that's together, we'll take our outer plates. Again, make sure the curved side, the soft side, goes against the diaphragm for both sides. And then next is the cone washer. Again, you want to make sure that the raised edge is going against the nut here. So we'll take this guy and make sure it's going the right direction on both sides. Take the nuts. You can put a little bit of anti-seize on here just to make the removal process for the next person a little bit easier. Not much anti-seize is needed, just a little bit, enough to just make it a little bit easier for the next person that has to service this guy. Then on both sides. Set that aside. And then for the nut, you'll notice that one side is curved and the other side is flat. You want to make sure that the flat side is against that cone washer. Go ahead and thread this guy on both sides. Grab our impact with a 7/8 socket and we'll just zap it on. And do the same to the other side. Just until they stop. And make sure that they're even on both sides. Wipe the excess anti-seize off. And you'll see that the shaft is at the same point on each side. And then from there, we'll go ahead and put the halves of the pump back on once they've been cleaned. You'll notice an arrow on the halves themselves, and you want to make sure that those are going in the right direction. So with the brass inlet, you want to make sure that that's pointing up, and so this guy's the same way. Another way to tell if it does not have the up arrows is the top part is different from the bottom. So see at the top here has a smooth surface all the way around, where the bottom has a cutout here. So the cutout goes on the bottom and the smooth goes up top. So we'll make sure these guys are there. We'll grab our anti-seize and start putting these guys back in. So just a little bit of anti-seize, again, just to make it easier for the next person that has to take this thing apart. And we'll just start putting it back together. And then we'll do the same thing for the other side. Make sure that this guy, again, is going in the right direction, the arrow up. All right, so now that these guys are back together, you can set the anti-seize aside, push the halves together, and then we'll swap out our socket for the 11/16. And we'll just nice and evenly around the side of it. We'll go in a star pattern. I like to just snug them down first to make sure everything's aligned properly. And then from there, we'll go ahead and tighten it down. Same thing, push on the side, and nice and snug, or evenly at first. So when we tighten, we want to make sure we go in a star pattern. So I start up here, go across, and then down here, back across, and then 1 and 2. You don't want these to be super tight. They don't have to be super tight. I usually go a couple seconds with the impact, and it'll be good enough just to get that seal from the diaphragm against the halves of the pumps. You want to go a little bit easier on these two right here, being that they don't have as much support, so you can actually see it bend as you tighten it down. You don't want it to bend. You want it to be as even as possible. And we'll do the same thing on this side, again with the star pattern. Just like that. And as a final check, we'll go around and make sure that it's all even all the way across. Just take a look at it. Looks good on both sides. So from here, we're ready to go back together. So the next step, I'll set this aside so you can see the balls and seats here. So like I said, when we were coming apart, we have two O-rings on the bottom of the top parts. So these O-rings are actually a little bit different size than the ones that go up top or the ones on the bottom of the bottom manifold. So looking here, you can see that the top one, or the one that goes on the bottom up top, is a little bit thinner and a little bit smaller. So we're going to take this guy, you'll have two of them compared to 4 of the larger ones. Take the 2 smaller ones and they'll go up top right here. And just push them down at the bottom. And then from there, it goes seat first, and it goes the ball, the cup, and then that thicker O-ring. Just like that. If you get them upside down, the pump will not work correctly. So again, we'll take the smaller of the 2 O-rings. We'll put this guy in here first, just push that guy down flat. And then the order in which they go is seat. This guy goes in first. You want to make sure that that lip goes up. Seat, ball, and then cup. And then that last O-ring up top. And then we'll put the top manifold back on. Up top here, make sure lined up, make sure the O-rings stay in place. And then from there, we'll grab 4 bolts and a little bit of anti-seize. Put these guys back in. And go ahead and tighten them down with 11/16. Just like that, and now it's ready to go back onto the cart. The next step in assembling the pump, we'll grab the O-ring, the ball, or the seat, the ball, and the cup, and we'll put the O-ring down first. Down here, again, seat, ball, and then cup. Otherwise it won't pump correctly, or pump at all. We'll do the same thing for the other side. O-ring first, kind of center it as best you can. So when you go to put the pump back on, top flange will be opposite from the bottom flange, and you want to make sure that the air fitting is on the correct side the air line is coming out of the regulator. We'll go ahead and line it up as best we can, coming down onto the seat balls and cups. And we'll line it up on the manifold. And then from there, you're ready for the bolts on the bottom. So grab the bolts, a little bit of anti-seize just like the top. And we'll go from here on the bottom and find it and just thread it lightly. And then I like to do 2, that way it doesn't really move around on me before I flip it up. Do the same thing on this side. And from there we can go ahead and flip it over and do the other 2. We grab the impact again with 11/16 and just tighten it down. All right, so now that's back together. You can spray a little bit of WD-40 in there to lubricate the shuttle, and then we'll go ahead and put some fresh Teflon tape on the airline and put it back together. And this is a swivel fitting, so it should be nice and easy to put some Teflon on. And I like to do a couple wraps, just like that. And this guy's good to go back together. And grab your crescent wrench. Tighten this guy down. Not super tight because you don't want the brass to crack, but snug to make that seal. Just like that. And if you do spray WD-40 in there, you want to make sure that you run the pump before you put the muffler on. You want to get all that WD-40 out. WD-40 can contaminate the muffler and cause it to clog sooner. So next we'll go ahead and grab the regulator and push up and it's a quarter turn and pull straight down. This guy will come off. You want to make sure that you don't lose track of these parts in here. Just leave that there, set that aside. This is a good opportunity to go ahead and clean the bowl as well. There's a 3/4 inch nut right here that you can take off and unthread. And then this whole assembly will separate and you can get a rag and clean all that out. And you just want to make sure that you don't lose any of the parts in there. So that guy can go off to the side. And this is a little, you just unthread this and the filter can come right off. In this case, the filter's still good. So we'll just throw it back on. And it doesn't have to be super tight, just snug. This guy, again, back up. Feel it go in and then quarter turn, and that's it. Run it, put your muffler back on after you get all the WD-40 out, and you're good to go. We have all parts in stock for Yamada pumps here at Carlsen Associates. If you have any questions, give us a call at 707-431-2000. We'll be happy to walk you through over the phone any questions that you have and get you any parts that you need. Thanks.